Ameet, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for the paid search webinar today. I am so glad to have you. I am so glad that I've gotten to know you. So everyone, I'd like to introduce Ameet Khabra. I practiced that ahead of time. She is the founder and owner of Hop Skip Media, and we think, according to the data, the owner of the largest Google Ads account on Instagram. Love it. Love it. So you started at sort of a grassroots level. So I love hearing your story where you were going around to local meetups talking about paid search and then realized, wow, I have a skill that is extremely marketable. So I love your story. I think another paid search influencer. So I couldn't be happier to have you. So thanks again. This webinar today, it is brought to you by Jumpfly, clever programmatic and ad world experience. We wouldn't be here without our gracious sponsors. So definitely give them a look. And then today we were going to be talking about PMax, and I could not be more excited to pass the mic to you. And then after the presentation, we will have some time for Q&A. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to the stage, and Ameet, take it over.
Perfect. Okay, so first I'm just going to start by saying that this is not my normal voice. I woke up sick this morning, so it might be a little trying. And I appreciate everybody being a little patient with me as I try to figure out how to present with this voice of mine. But like Sarah said, I'm Ameet Khabra. I own an online marketing agency that specializes in pay-per-click advertising, but now we do actually SEO, which has been really cool and exciting, called Hop Skip Media, and I am AdWords girl all over the internet. I am very aware that it's not called Google AdWords anymore. It's just that sentimentally, I can't let go of the name. So it's forever going to be AdWords girl, regardless of how many other name changes Google Ads goes through. Today we're going to be going over a couple of things. First, understanding the problem with PMax, the role of AI in Performance Max. We did a quick little experiment towards the end of Q3 of last year, and I want to kind of share those results with everybody, and then we're going to dive into the actual stuff that you guys came here for, what takes Performance Max from PMeh to PMax. And we could credit my intern for the name because this one wasn't me. I'm not that clever. Okay, so to understand the problems with Performance Max, so I could sit here and talk about the complexities and the lack of transparency with Performance Max, the concerns in regards to the black box nature of AI. But I think talking about the common slip-ups that I've noticed in accounts as I've audited a number of them over the years, especially with Performance Max in them, these are kind of the top three that I find to be a common theme. So insufficient data. One of the key things with Performance Max is that it does require a lot of data to perform effectively, and without that data, the algorithm won't really know how to identify, or not know how to, it won't be able to identify patterns and optimize your campaign more effectively. With ineffective ad copy, again, the AI is taking the ad copy and identifying keywords. So if we're not putting, or identifying keywords and audiences, so if we're not putting relevant keywords into our ad copy and tailoring it or personalizing it, again, the AI is not going to know where to go to find the audience that they think that will convert. And that's just going to result into obviously poor performance and wasted ad spend. And then last, or not last, but number three, unclear conversion tracking. In this, if conversion tracking is not set up properly, it's incredibly difficult to measure, honestly, really anything, the effectiveness of your campaigns. And that goes with conversion tracking in search campaigns, display campaigns, YouTube, everything. But it's a common issue that I keep on seeing time and time again, which is a little annoying for me because I'm always talking about conversion tracking and how that needs to be number one. So it's one of the things that keeps on coming up. And then what ends up happening on the flip side of it is we start to see this downward spiral afterwards. There's a lack of monitoring. A lot of people tend to have started to believe that Performance Max is a set it and forget it type of campaign. It is not. Nothing in pay-per-click is set it and forget it. I would love for everyone to really, really like sit on that and actually almost meditate on it, because like the number of times that I've watched or audited accounts where they literally set up Performance Max and then walked away, never did anything, is actually quite astounding. The next is poor poor ad targeting. If your ads are not targeted to the right audience, again, you're less likely to be seen by the people who are likely to convert for your product and are interested in your product. So that again will lead to poor performance and wasted ad spend. And then unintended conversion actions. If your conversion actions are not updated or monitored, and this is the other part of it where we set up conversion tracking and then we never go back to it. And I know that I'm a little notorious for this. Sometimes it's something that we've added into our SOPs now so we don't have this problem, but the worst thing to wake up to, or not even to wake up to, is the thing to realize is that maybe one of the conversion actions that you had set up is no longer working and you just never noticed. So having quick checks and balances every we do it at least once a quarter at this point, depending on the accounts. If it's a larger account, we'll probably do it about once a month, just because we don't want anything to fall off the rails. But just doing a quick check of all your conversion events and making sure that they're firing correctly is a really quick way to ensure that you're on the right track. And then what ends up happening after that is, and especially when we're talking about the conversion tracking or the lack of conversion tracking and the incorrect audience, or not, the incorrect targeting, is something called the feedback loop of doom, coined by Scott Redgate. So essentially what happens is we launch a Performance Max, bots and spammers start to crawl our sites, they convert, and then naturally Google goes, hey, we did our job. This is amazing. We're so great. We're amazing. And what they end up doing is obviously they start spending more money on on those audiences, thinking that those are actually legitimate audiences that are actually converting and are going to turn into sales for us. Then what ends up happening after that is that it turns into invalid clicks. Those bots and those spammers start to crawl the site more, and it just turns into this like loop of doom that's very, very hard to get out of. So once you're in that, we've only done this once, but once I realized that I was in that state, I actually completely cut that campaign and actually restarted it and made the fixes that we needed to make to ensure that we weren't in this. And that's something that I'll go over in a little bit. So sorry. Next, we're going to talk about the role of AI in Performance Max. So AI is not just a buzzword anymore. It's influencing how we market, and it's a robust tool that's going to give us, or not even that is going to give us, it already has given us deep insights, makes our campaigns more effective, and helps us to almost dream a little bit bigger in what we can actually do as marketers, which I think is really, really cool and really positive, because I feel like a lot of content that's going out right now, especially regarding AI, is so negative. Like everyone's very scared that it's going to replace our jobs. I don't really necessarily agree with that. And I think the AI is just going to help us widen our world out a little bit more and allow us to do more cool things. So PMax is driven on Google's state-of-the-art AI. I believe, well, not everybody, but we recently heard that Gemini is going to be rolled out on Google Ads a couple days ago, especially on the conversational AI side of things, and that's going to be rolled out to all of English-speaking accounts. But I haven't seen anything yet, so I'm assuming that the US is going to be first, and then Canada, as always, is going to be at a later time. And then when it comes to AI's role in optimization, it really kind of comes in bid scaling. So optimizing your bids to what Google says is a laser focused target on your ROI, your audience optimization. So AI smartly targets the right audiences for your ads in regards to time and place, or being in front of the person at the right time and place. Placement optimization, strategically placing ads across the network or across the Google Ads network to maximize results. And then creative optimization, where it'll optimize creatives for different audiences and different placements. And this segues me to the case study that I really, really wanted to talk about because I had a lot of fun doing it. So we did, actually first, is it not showing? Okay, there was a video in here. It really isn't anything special. So it's just basically going over how Google announced on November 7th that the generative AI is going to, or was being rolled out. And I guess it's continuing to be rolled out. So all the US accounts should should see it or should start seeing it. And then all the other countries like Canada, the UK and such will start seeing it in later months. So when learning about the generative AI side of things wasn't something that was new to us in November. It was something that we had heard about for months and months and months in advance. So I kind of sat with that and kind of looked at everything and went, I wonder how this would actually go. Would AI win or would human content win? So we decided to put a study or an experiment or whatever you want to call it together. Our time frame was for 8 weeks. We did it for Hopskip Media. Admittedly, I didn't choose the greatest location. I think we chose Chicago for it. And realizing it now, that was probably not the smartest decision, just based off of competition. Our ad type was RSAs in the search network, and then we spent $500. So the combined results were clicks were 91 clicks, impressions were 2019, our click-through rate was 4.51, and our average CPC was 5.19. When we split up the results, we can see that humans kicked AI's butt. We more than doubled the clicks. The impressions number under humans should be 1306, not 1036. Yeah, I just did some quick math and that's not incorrect. 1306. Almost more than doubled impressions. Our click-through rate was more than 1% higher, and even our CPC was more than $1 lower. And then there's a couple inferences that we can kind of take from all of this, really at this point, or not really at this point. So the human-generated content got twice as many clicks, and that's probably just because we're able to grab our own attention. Like humans are able to grab humans' attention better in that sense. With the higher CTR, again, more engaging content, and lower CPC obviously kind of came in with the higher CTR, more relevant ad copy, and all of that great stuff. Sorry. I'm still alive. I'm still surviving. I'm just having a little bit of a hard time. And then there's a couple of considerations that we have to make when we're looking at our results at the end of it. Oops, see Daisy's wrong. So the length of our experiment was only for 8 weeks. I do have plans to do another one like this, except adding landing pages to the mix. And at that point, I would want that test to be at least 3 to 4 months, just so we can gather enough information. The budget of the experiment was small. We only spent $500. The audience changes from business to business. So in some cases, AI dry content that AI is writing could work for certain businesses. And then also the other thing that we have to consider or keep in the back of our minds, especially with the generative AI that Google has now released to everybody, chances are very high that they're going to push that content further than anything that you upload into Google Ads as well. So we have to remember that even when initially Performance Max came out, everybody was talking about it in a way that that it was absolutely amazing and groundbreaking and all of these great things, and it definitely was to a certain degree. But again, Google wanted to push their own agenda in a sense. And I don't want to make it sound like the Google is the bad guys, because naturally that's where my head goes. But we have to remember that in some cases, when they want to prove point, that they're going to push their own content a little bit more than they will our own. And I would just love for everybody to remember that as we move into possibly implementing, trying Google's generative AI. Not too sure if I'm going too fast, but My apologies if I am. And now finally, how to go from PMeh to PMax. I love that name so much. Oh gosh. Okay, so the way that I broke all of this down was almost by how we would set up a campaign in a sense, so conversion tracking structure and then going into the assets. The last couple pieces that I have in this, I wasn't really sure where to put them, so they're kind of just awkwardly at the end, just to preface how I'm going through all of this. So first things first, conversion tracking. We talked about it a little bit at the start of our presentation. So GTAG is honestly the bare minimum, I would say, in terms of what should be implemented. The additional two, so implementing enhanced conversions and then implementing consent mode is something that's becoming increasingly more important this year, especially with third-party cookies being removed from Google's side of things, which is heartbreaking, but fine, we'll do it. So adding in enhanced conversions and consent mode typically actually shows us an increase of measured conversions of about 5 to, I want to say, 15-20%. So what that actually ends up doing for us is it cleans up our data a little bit more. We're able to see where things are actually coming from and actually being able to measure more accurately, which is the name of the game really at this point, especially with all the massive changes that are coming our way in the next, actually this year. And then also in your conversion tracking, the two things that I really want everyone to focus on is one, we want to avoid duplication in transactions for e-commerce. We don't want to have obviously unclean data really at that point. And then on the other hand, on the lead generation side, we want to be able to provide an offline conversion data. So having that CRM integration and feeding in one party. I saw one P in my head. First party data will be really truly the game changer for everybody. So if you don't know how to get the integration going, especially on the lead generation side, OCI Helper is one that has helped me a number of times. We have one client who actually uses an Excel file as their CRM, and it's aggravating, but we're able to actually use that file the way that he's able to use it and actually put it back into Google. And that's because we used OCI Helper to do it, because otherwise I don't think I'd ever be able to figure out how to do it without the help of OCI. Next, we're going to move on to audience signals. So the one thing that we have to remember with audience signals is that we're trying to give the algorithm information of who the audience is. As Google has already stated in their documentation that they will go outside of the parameters of our audience signals. So they'll go where they think that they'll be able to find a conversion for us. So if it's not within our parameters, Google will step outside of it. It has said it multiple times. So that's one thing that we have to remember, is that our audience signals aren't actually targeting. They're more like kind of a hybrid of observation mode, in a sense. It's probably the best way, maybe. And then also feeding it more information actually only widens out our audience, which is another thing that I think everybody needs to really remember, is that the more information that we're able to give it, the wider it can go. The less information, the more narrow it becomes. And then we also want to focus on, or not also want to focus on, and then something that I've noticed that works really, really well is combining signals. So first party data, remarketing list, customer list, having the CRM integration going, and then layering it with high intent audiences that Google has suggested actually works really, really well, because really at this point, they already have an idea of who those people are. So we're just kind of piggybacking off of that by adding in a layer of our own data to sit there and be like, okay, well, this is what you found and this is who our people are. Let's combine this together to really kind of narrow everything down, which I've noticed has worked phenomenally especially for lead generation. And then for the e-commerce side of things, A question that I get from a lot of people, especially on Instagram, I do AMAs every so often, and a lot of the questions kind of come around how to segment better, or what should we be segmenting for. So creating lists is obviously a big one. So for e-commerce, I would suggest doing new customers, returning customers, high spending users, obviously, and then low value users as well. And when I say low value users, I mean the people who are usually coming in to your shop for a sale at this point. And what we want to do with these lists is obviously use them at different times, but for low value is the one that usually kind of breaks someone's brain a little bit, because they're like, why would we want to have a list of our low value users? But if we're running a sale like Black Friday or Boxing Day, or let's say, I don't know, funnily enough, maybe after Valentine's Day for like the heartbreakers, we could put that list in and be like, okay, well, these people always buy when there's a sale, so we want to just promote our products or our services to these people, because we already know that the chances of them purchasing during a sale is significantly higher. And then on the lead generation side is macro and the micro conversions. So macro conversions are the things that what I like to say move the needle in your business. So let's say a contact form, booking a demo, that kind of stuff. And then the micro conversions could be like a case study download, looking at an infographic, maybe reading testimonials or something along those lines. And then again, high value or high LTV and then low LTV. Low LTV users. Sorry, my brain stopped working for a second there. And then when we're moving into structure, this is where it gets a little bit fun. So my core competency has come from lead generation. E-commerce isn't necessarily something that I've had a ton of experience in, but this is what we've noticed within Hopskip Media that works relatively well. Vyacheslav, who is my shopping guy, this is how he names them. I don't know if this is like how everybody else names it, but these are his names. So when we're segmenting our feed in e-commerce for Performance Max, what we want to do is do general, so all goods, winners. So the winners would be the products that have the best results. Your potentials are the ones that have good ROAS or ROI, but low conversion numbers. And then we've got our bleeders where they have high impressions and then low conversions. And then zombies rarely seen. And then what we've called dead, which is completely just not shown to anybody at this point. So when we give Google our entire feed, we're not really giving them directive. They'll show the user products that they think will convert the best, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it will actually result in the best performance. So when comparing results, ensuring that you're acknowledging how much impressions and clicks each product is getting is also something that we have to keep an eye on, because we can't compare one product that's gotten 2,000 impressions and 20 conversions to a product that has gotten maybe, let's say, 10 impressions and one conversion, or point something of a conversion. We can kind of make in like our own hypothesis, maybe is the word for it, where we sit there and go, okay, well, if that second product had more time, maybe it would actually convert better, but we can't really do that unless we have those segmented out a little bit better. And then, oh, yes, my note. I forgot about my note. And then we don't want to do this unless there's more than 30 conversions happening in that account. We don't want anything less than 30 conversions. And that's because Mike Ryan at SMEC actually did a whole study around it, and it's absolutely phenomenal and great. And essentially what we end up seeing here is that from 0.01 to 30 conversions, the likeliness of the Performance Max campaign performing below target is significantly higher than any other range. And we can see it most notably when we go from 30 to 60, where that drop is like the most drastic that we'll ever see, or we do see. So it's not surprising that campaigns with 30 or less conversions are more of a hit or miss, because that's what we've been seeing in the market really at this point. A lot of people who speak very poorly about Performance Max are usually the folks that are converting 30 or less, or at least that's what I've noticed, especially with the people that I speak to on Instagram quite frequently, is that their conversions, they're looking to segment out at 30 or less conversions, and that's why it's not working. So then they sit there and they're like, well, what am I doing wrong? Well, this is it. The most troubling part is that even at 60 to 90, the odds are still of you missing or matching it or exceeding are pretty much equal. So if we look at yeah, 60, they're basically, it's like a third each really at that point, right? So that's kind of where it's a little troubling, where it's just like, oh, so we have to actually maybe look at getting more than 90 conversions to really actually really see the true benefit of Performance Max, which is a little disheartening for obviously smaller business owners, because that sometimes might not be the case for them. They might not be able to hit that 150. But it's just something to think about, especially when we're creating campaigns for ecom and even lead generation, if we really think about it, is to remember that we're not segmenting. We're not segmenting and taking away information from Google, when we should just consolidate everything and give it exactly how it is. Then on the lead generation side, we would segment in two ways. So the ways that I segment are either by different daily budget per service. So this is when there's a little bit of seasonality within the products, and then different CPA targets. In that case, I think a really great example would be auto. I spent a large chunk of the starting of my career in automotive. So we could take something like repairing a chip on your windshield to getting a tire rotation, where where we could say that, let's say the profit margins are the same, just for the sake of the math, with the windshield maybe costing about $50 and the rotation, let's say $100, the profit margin is the same. The CPA targets are going to be drastically different just because of the price points. So that's where I would separate the campaign, just knowing that there is a discrepancy between the CPA targets, and I don't want everything just to be muddied into one campaign. And then something to, sorry, I was doing so well without coughing. So before I could dive into this, the first thing that I would suggest is that you max out your search campaigns before you actually move on to Performance Max. So when I say max out, I mean keyword match types, DSAs, new keywords, all of, like, actually really expanding out your keywords, all of that great stuff. Because we already know that Performance Max is a black box. So what I want to do is keep control as much as I possibly can, and where I can keep that control is in the search campaigns that I have running. And then with B2B, and something to note on that side is that with B2B, we have a more narrow target, and Performance Max will definitely pull from search campaigns. We've seen it happen so many times. That was probably the biggest complaint that a lot of people had, especially when it first came out, was what the heck is happening? Why are all my other campaigns tanking while Performance Max seems to be doing well? And that's because it's pulling from other pulling from our own campaigns really at this point. And that's because we haven't fully maxed out the search side of things. So, and we preemptively went into, or prematurely, not preemptively, prematurely went into Performance Max when maybe we should have held off on it a little bit. So when it comes to B2B, it will most definitely pull, just because it's so significantly harder to make it work. And I don't think I know I have not made it work for B2B. For B2C, I've seen much more success, just because obviously the audience is a little bit wider. So yeah, just a couple things right there. And then for the structure in terms of lead generation, optimizing for one conversion event, Google doesn't let you change the conversion based off of the platform or the network we're on. So GDN, Gmail, YouTube, it won't change. So we have to really think about that and go, okay, what's a good conversion point on every single platform, and really consider that carefully, because we really need to make sure that we're actually optimizing our conversion really at this point. And then also consider micro conversions. So something that I've really enjoyed doing as of late is almost like a micro and macro conversion campaign. So macro conversion obviously is optimizing for, let's say, a form fill. And then our micro conversion is optimizing for something, let's say, like a download of a white paper. So we work with a client who is in the energy space in the US. So they have a white paper that they have, that they want people to download and understand what the benefits are, because at this point the government's essentially paying you to implement some of these energy initiatives. So what they've done is created this white paper for larger corporations to obviously download, read, and actually quite understand that this is something that's going to be amazing for them. And then the aim is obviously to get them to book a demo call, or not a demo call, to book a call with a sales rep, so that way they can actually talk about it more in depth. So what we ended up doing was two campaigns, a micro and a macro conversion campaign, where the micro conversion obviously is converting at its highest, but then we have the macro conversion underneath that is converting less, but we actually see it kind of coming in now. And the reason is that our search campaign, although it was generating some bookings, it wasn't doing it consistently enough. And Performance Max has actually really helped us do that. And really think that adding that micro conversion that micro conversion Performance Max campaign really helped lift the macro side of it, because we were able to take the information from the micro, or the first party information from micro, and dump it back into the macro. And it just kind of turned into this beautiful cycle. So it's not a feedback loop of doom now, it's a feedback loop of beautiful, beautiful data, I guess. I don't know how else to say it. um, and then the other part is to spend more time on what your offer is. So I've been reading Alex Hormozy's $100 million offer at least like a couple times a year, just to refresh myself, because I really just enjoy his content. So what I really think about when we're writing ad copy for our clients now is, what's the offer and how do we convey it? And something else that I've been really kind of evaluating is obviously using less words and seeing how that works out a little bit better. So we've been doing some cool, I don't know, I think it's cool stuff with ad copy. And I also think that a lot of people need to go back and actually just work on that offer and really, really come down to, is this something that somebody can say no to? And if the answer is yes, then you go back to the drawing board and just try again. And then also use the data from your campaigns to validate those assumptions too, if you don't necessarily have the resources to continue to work on ad copy over and over and over again. And then also utilize custom intent audiences, which is somewhat of a no-brainer, I guess. I'm going to just take a sip of my water because my throat hurts. So next we're going to move on to assets. First is ad copy. We want to avoid using generic language, obviously be a bit more actionable. Focus on the headlines. I know that, yes, descriptions are there and we want to fully utilize them, but focus on the headlines. That's what's drawing that person's eyes in. So let's really, really make sure that we're actually focusing on that offer, and we're focusing on making sure that we're conveying our point very, very quickly and succinctly. Apparently, I'm having so much trouble talking today. Ensure your benefit is conveyed. So going back to the offer, keyword match, again, very, 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 very important. We need to make sure that we're actually implementing our keywords into our ad copy, because again, the AI in Performance Max is using that to find relevant audiences and relevant, or they're trying to find relevant audiences and keywords to target. Message match is still very much important and valid in our day. So we want to make sure that what we're telling our audience that they're going to receive in our ad copy is also being conveyed in that landing point. Otherwise, they're just going to drop off and we're going to end up with poor results again. And then also don't forget your CTAs. I think for a lot of us, because there's 15 headlines available, we think so much about what those headlines should really be and how to convey the USP. how to convey what our offer is and all of that great stuff. But then CTAs tend to fall on the wayside as well. So what ends up happening is that we have all of this great copy, but no actual call to action. So just remember to at least add a couple at the end. So usually for us, if we're writing all 15, we want to make sure that there's at least about 3 to 4 CTAs in there. That way it's a good mix right across the board. And then for images, oh gosh, so much. I love images. There's just, oh, wrong slide. Oopsies. I need to not touch things so much. So for images, this is where we want to make sure that all of our most important information is right in the center. And that's because Google will adjust the size based off of the ad inventory. So an ad that I really have always kind of liked is this polo one. It tells you who the brand is. Obviously, we know it's clothing. And even if we were to shrink that into a smaller size, we would still be able to see the clothing, somewhat of that lifestyle, and then also still be able to tell what the brand is. So we want to make sure that we're always putting everything front and center, fully knowing that Google will probably stretch and contort our ads in different ways. And we unfortunately don't have much control over that, but we do have control over how how we're presenting our offers, and that how we're presenting our offers and making sure that they're in the center. So that way everybody who sees the ads in the wild won't be confused at a later time where something might be cut off and then it doesn't necessarily make any sense. Then with creative video, so this is where I've been focusing a lot more time, just because it's almost very like TikTok videos, Reels, YouTube, which I mean, yeah, obviously YouTube. So the first thing first, we want to make sure that the quality of our video is the best possible. So 1080p, the video length. I get this question quite a bit as well. It needs to be as long as it needs to be. It doesn't necessarily, I believe the minimum is, I want to say 10 seconds. So if you have 10 seconds worth of content, then let's go with 10 seconds. If you feel like you need more than that, 30 seconds, then take 30 seconds. Because really at this point, we really need to make sure that we're actually conveying what we want to. And I think the idea of creating shorter content really comes from YouTube when we have the 5 seconds, the 5-second buffer before they're able to skip. So now everybody kind of has that in their head where we're like within that we have 5 seconds. That's not necessarily true anymore. We have more than 5 seconds, but should we still be looking at those first 5 seconds maybe more intently? Yes, for sure. And I think following YouTube's framework, the ABCD. Yeah, I was going to say E at the end of it. And I was like, wait, no. So attract, brand, connect, and direct. So what we want to do is within those 5 seconds, hook them in, really kind of have them really drawn in. And I take inspiration from Reels and TikToks really at that point, because those folks are just so great at really like pulling you in and holding your attention. So if you're having troubles trying to find out what kind of content would work, I do honestly would really encourage you to just go to TikTok and Instagram and look at their reels and see what people are doing there and just kind of make variations of that. It's worked out really relatively well for us, especially for consumer brands. B2C, a little wonky, but it can work relatively well. And then with brand, you want to tell them who you are, obviously. So you want to get your branding out right away, because if they leave within X amount of seconds, they're not going to know who we are. Connecting, we want to hold their attention with emotion. So I think a relatively good example could be like maybe me creating a reel online, or not online, on Instagram, saying, hey, here are my top 5 secrets on how to lower your CPC or something. And that's going to hook them in. And then naturally I would move into, hi, I'm Ameet. I own Hopskate Media. I've been doing this for almost half my life, 15 years now. And then I would connect and hold them by telling them a little bit about myself, but then also giving them the information that they're looking for. And at the end of it, I would direct them, which would be the CTA. And at that point, it would be to subscribe or follow or maybe engage with the content. In a case for a business, obviously, it would be to convert. Because we have to remember, I like to say users are 5-year-olds. We have to tell them exactly what we want them to do. We have to tell them in like the the easiest way possible. So also remember that with your CTAs, not to make it too complicated. Oh gosh, we're almost done and I can save my voice. So next is opting out of search partners networks. And I put a question mark there because I think a lot of people really think about that. And I think it's still very much some people believe that it will not work at all. And then there's some people who believe that it will work. Not obviously, I like to let the data tell me exactly what it's doing, but Nava Hopkins actually made an excellent point several weeks ago, where she had said to be careful about excluding the search partners network exclusively. There are some valuable placements within the SPN, and I'd take the blessing of the exclusion in PMax with very seriously, I guess, in that sense of like, does this actually make sense? So I think a lot of people saw the exclusion kind of coming in, and they went, yes, most definitely, we hate it, and naturally started seeing a little bit of a drop off. And I think they didn't really analyze their data, and that was something that I noticed in a campaign that I had audited. I want to say a couple of weeks ago at this point. So Nava's post must have been like a month or two ago then at this point. And I remember sitting there thinking about it, and I was like, well, it's very evident that they saw the news bulletin come out and say, hey, we can exclude SPN now, but they obviously did not take a look at what the data was telling them. So please make sure that you do take a look at it, but we also do get the options to pick and choose what parts of the SPN we want to show up in, and then also take a look at that data and then carefully implement that, because obviously we're going to see massive swings if you aren't looking at your data first. Opting out of automatically created assets. This one I think I'll die on this hill, actually. I do not want Google creating anything for me, or automatically creating anything for me, I should say. I don't mind the generative AI side of things, especially if I'm sitting there looking at it and then going in and editing as they're creating that content. But I do not like the idea of Google automatically creating assets. Advertisers still need to maintain some level of control. And this holds even true in highly regulated industries. So like finance is one that we've just kind of gotten to a point where we're like, we can't do this anymore just because it's so highly regulated and we constantly come into issues. But if you're working in finance, obviously there are certain things that we can't do or say. Housing also has their own restrictions. So if you have specific landing pages that you're sending users to, turn off the URL expansion setting at the campaign level. If you need to maintain control over your ad copy and your assets, and making sure that you actually uncheck the opting in, and then make sure that you opt out on it, so that way Google is not creating and implementing assets on your behalf without your knowledge, or possibly without your knowledge. And then finally, adding negative keywords placements and topics. So as a reminder, PMax is an automated campaign, which means that you can't target keywords, but you can exclude them. So as Performance Max continues to become more sophisticated, Google now allows us to add in negative keyword lists at the campaign level, or is it at the campaign level? Yeah, it's campaign level. But at the very minimum, creating a list of targeted brand keywords and excluding them from PMax is something that I would highly suggest, especially if you have a branded keyword campaign in search. Exclude the brand in Performance Max just to make sure that you don't have any cannibalization happening, and then allow. What's the last? There's the last point. And this will allow you to ensure that your tried and true search campaigns aren't thrown off the balance, and you're able to optimize them the way that you want to without having Performance Max cannibalize your existing efforts, and then truly, you're truly going to have that separation in between the two, at least with your search campaign. I kind of forgot what I was trying to end off with, but that is my presentation. I am so grateful for all of you for bearing with me as I try to get over this brain fog and this whatever is happening to my voice. But yeah, thank you. You can connect with me on email. If you want to check out our website for whatever reason, you can. And then I'm AdWords Girl all over the internet. Yeah, thanks.
Hi, Ameet. I probably popped up there a little sooner than I expected, but it sounds like I saved you from a cough. So thank you so much. I'll leave your contact up for a little bit before we get into the Q&A, and I'll try to be long-winded in my questions to give your voice a break. I really appreciate you sticking with us despite not feeling well. One thing we had in the comments, it wasn't a question, but I definitely think it's worth sort of bringing up to the top and maybe posing it as a question. We have, I believe it's Edgar, and he said, if you're aiming for valuable placements in the search SPN, the partner network, that you would need a separate campaign for that. Have you done anything like that in the past? I personally have not, so I'd love to hear from you.
Honestly, I haven't. Actually, that's I think I might want to try that later. That's a great idea. Actually, my mind never went that way. I just naturally just went, oh, we can exclude or we can pick and choose on that side. And I went, okay, let's go with that. But I never actually thought about taking a step further and actually maybe doing like a separate campaign. That's actually great. No. Actually interesting.
Exactly. And, you know, I thought it was the interesting comment that you made, because I put this down as a question too, as far as the exclusions with the brand exclusions. I want to dive a little bit deeper into that, because my experience with brand exclusions is a little bit different. They were something obviously I wanted at the beginning, just because I was working at the brand that was really trying to grow their brand. And so then when we launched PMax and they weren't there, I felt like they came too late. So would you go back in time and add those, or would you suggest it's working, everyone's happy? How do you approach changes like that come maybe after you've sort of had those tough conversations with the client?
Yeah, I think for us, it's more or less of making sure that everyone's happy with everything. So like obviously what our client targets are different than what they are internally.
Yeah.
I naturally make them harder internally just because that's just how we are. So if we're all on the same page, then I don't necessarily see a problem with it. It's when obviously there isn't, and especially when it's client.
Yeah.
It's a client concern, that's when the red flags start going off in my head. And I'm like, okay, we need to see something different or do something different. If it's internally, then I might hold off on it for an extra month and be like, let's see what happens. But yeah, I think it's the typical marketing answer. It depends.
Yeah, no, totally. And now, John has a question. How are you thinking about feedless PMax, and how would you structure that?
Oh gosh,
I know it's a tough question there.
That's a really tough question.
Because you have to visualize.
Oh my gosh. We haven't done a feedless campaign.
Me neither.
So that, yeah. I don't know how I feel about that. That's a little terrifying. I don't know. I believe Mike actually did like another study around that. I feel like I read something where he did one where it was fully built out, feed only, and then no feed. I think I might have a screenshot of it somewhere. Actually, let me just see if I can find it. I remember it so clearly because I remember I was going to message him about it and be like, what's going on here, bud? Like, this is really interesting.
While you're looking for that, I will say that is absolutely amazing, the connections that we've been able to form, I think, with Paid Search Association and with this community, that we can remember what other people are saying. Then,
there's just so many smart people out there that it's just like, for me, I sit there and I mean, we've had this conversation where I like constantly am just overly critical of myself, but I'm like, I don't necessarily need to know everything. I just need to know who the people are who know everything. And then I can just kind of direct it around. So finding Mike's studies was like one of the big game changers for me, especially for even this presentation, where I was like, oh, like, this is what I've been looking for, but I don't have the resources to do it. And now there's somebody who's so kind and wonderful to be able to do that. So I don't know.
And recognizing, the right answer, I think, is a sign of an expert too, because if we weren't experts, we wouldn't be able to recognize the truth in the answer. So I definitely agree there. And plug for the Slack community that we have with Paid Search Association, where you can come in and get these questions answered and then get links back in some of these.
Yeah, so I found a screenshot. So it's not necessarily in regards to performance, it's what he's noticed in terms of how people have built out their campaigns. So what we've seen here is single asset group campaigns are more common, and they perform notably worse than a feed only or a multi-group type of campaign.
Okay.
So I'm hoping that somewhat answers his question there. Because the multi-asset group campaign, on the other hand, has had performance more comparable to the feed campaign. Specifically, the multi-asset group suffered on CPC and conversion rate, but the AOV was significantly better than what you would see in the feed-only campaign.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Actually, I had a unique situation, and I'd be curious if you've had something like this. And I'm going to try to explain it without breaking any type of NDA here. So I had a main product category, right? And then I had a sub category. So like think about not quite an accessory, but something related to the product, but not the main product. And I had put that into a separate Performance Max campaign. And the first Performance Max campaign that covered sort of that main category was staying in category, right? It was obviously doing a little bit of brand. It was leaning into some non-brand, but the sort of sub-relational category was leaning heavily into an entirely different generic group with different competitors, and it didn't stand well enough on its own. So I put it back into the main one, and it started performing again. So it was interesting. And when I say performing, I mean, it was getting attention from having its own asset group and sort of collaborating with the main topic, because it really was related. So I don't know if you've had anything like that. I mean, I guess we just said it depends again, right?
Yeah, for me, when in doubt, I say consolidation more than anything else, because really at this point we want to give it as much. Again, it needs a significant amount of data to be able to pick out those patterns and optimize correctly. So and that's why I said no less than 30, because really at this point, then we're just segmenting little fractions of data if we can't figure it out ourselves with 30 conversions, really at this point, AI is not going to be able to figure those patterns out any further.
Yeah.
So then we need to really make sure that we're just consolidating. I think everybody really needs to go into consolidation first and then segment, where I feel like a lot of people, especially with the questions that I get, they go segmenting first and then consolidation. And I was like, no, it needs to be the other way around. We need to combine everything, as illogical as it may seem to some of us. We really need to put that together and then separate out based off of performance.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And then another question I had, and it had to do with when you were on the slide about signals. I wanted to know how often you're switching signals, because you made a comment about knowing that, a certain group that responded to sales did well a certain time of the year. I will admit, I start my signals out as that sort of springboard, and I'm not touching them. I'm letting Google go out and spread its tentacles. That's the best term to use. So yeah, I wanted to hear about your approach to that.
I think for us, it's really based off of performance at this point. So if I'm noticing that it's not getting the traction that I want it to, then I'm going to be looking at expanding at the audience signals.
Okay.
But again, if we're looking at in-market affinity type of signals, that's just obviously just what it is. It's a signal, right? Where I think a lot of people have gotten it confused with targeting and signals. So then we're just broadening that out. But where I really want to be making more frequent changes is with our first party data, uploading those lists a bit more frequently, making sure that those are up to date. Because I really feel like that's where I've noticed the more significant impact is actually through the first party data, not necessarily from the audience signals themselves.
Yeah, no.
Or the ones that Google has provided, I should say.
Yeah, no, that absolutely is something. There's something to that for sure. And so then I guess I would ask, sort of along the same lines, do you by any chance remember when the first time you launched PMax was?
Oh gosh, it was, I want to say Q2 of 2022.
Okay.
So I am notorious. Like I don't know. I like to say that I'm the worst, but I don't think this is the worst thing. I like everybody else doing it first, telling me where they failed, and then me going in and figuring it out afterwards. Because then at the very least, like I don't need to be the first. I just want to be the best. So for me, I sit there and I just watch. Even when demand gen came
Yes.
out, I've literally just sat there, just watched everybody. I'm like, you tell me what your insights are. Let me take it, find where the commonalities are between everybody saying that, and then these are what I'm going to start off with. So if somebody's saying, "Hey, don't do this," and there's 4 other people corroborating that story, then I'm going to believe it to be true because there's so many more other people talking about it, and then I'll put it as a test for myself. So then that way I already have like these preset experiments that I didn't have to do a lot of work for.
Okay. No, that makes sense. And the reason I asked is, once you launch, how married are you to that structure? And go back to, the tentative way in which I will manage a e-com client that is really performing. So when I first launched my structure, I probably wouldn't do it that way today. But I didn't want to change that. And I wasn't sure if you have had those same experiences. Now, to be fair, that was a collaborative decision with the client. I said, we could, if somebody were to audit this, right? Because that's a tactic to get the business, they might find problems with this. We could change this, but this is where you're happy. And the client said, no, do not.
I think that's really where it comes down to is whether or not the client's happy with it. For me, especially with something that's so brand new. So if I'm taking myself back to when we first launched it, honestly, I don't think I would have changed structure. I think I would have kept it the same just because I sat there and went, okay, well, this is how we're supposed to do it.
I know.
And then the whole idea of like, does it have enough data? Are we like at what? Because like we can sit there and say, oh, with keyword performance or something along those lines, that maybe we look at it after 250 impressions or something. Like everybody has their own number in their head. Some have it in the thousands, some have it in the hundreds, some have it in like, oh, it's 50 impressions and we're going to look at it then. So it kind of goes back to that, is just what do you feel is enough data to actually be able to tell you that that it's time to change the structure. And I think at that time I didn't know what that looked like because it was completely and utterly new. So I just went, okay, this is how we're supposed to do it. If it didn't work, we tried it for about 2-3 months, I think. And then at that point, it was just like, if it's not working, it's not working. So now everything, obviously, especially from this presentation, is my own learnings, and then also everybody else like trying and failing. And I think that's where the beauty really kind of comes in terms of campaign management, is really the trial and error, is figuring out what exactly worked and what didn't.
Yeah, no, I thoroughly agree. No, I think with 3 minutes left, there may be time for this one last question, and it came in from Edgar, and then I definitely want to spend some time, giving the sponsors a thank you. So it sounds like Edgar, I'm not going to read the question fully, but he is definitely, doesn't seem like he's a PMax fan. So why did you feel like it was a choice in a direction that you wanted to go? I love that question.
That's a really good one. Honestly, for me, I'm always curious. Like, I want to know if there's a way to improve. Like, I'm just a highly competitive person.
Same.
And like very competitive with myself. Like I'm the worst. So like in my head, I'll sit there and be like, I did this within 2 months for this one client. Can I do it faster? The next thing in was like, Google presented this almost magical campaign format, and they said, you're going to do wondrous things with it. And really at this point, it was for obviously larger brands as we're like starting to learn more and more about it. But I saw a way to possibly improve what we were doing. And at the end of the day, I want to make sure that our clients are getting the best of the best, and not adding it in, I thought, was a disservice at that time. And now learning, obviously, it's not for every single client. And really just figuring out who that needs to be for, versus us like just spending money and wasting it, which was kind of the start of Performance Max for us, unfortunately. So now it depends on who gets it. If the client actually can take on that ad spend, but also can we actually make it work? Do we have that first party data integration? Do we have the feed set up properly and all those great things? Then maybe, it might work. But yeah, I think for me, it's just more or less of deciding on which client it would work for now. But before it was really purely kind of ego based, where I was like, well, if this is going to work, it's going to work for us too. And obviously, we've learned that that's not necessarily the case anymore.
Awesome. That is perfect. Well, let me go ahead and thank our sponsors today. And this webinar, it's brought to you by Jumpfly, Clever Programmatic, and the AdWorld Experience. I would like to thank you so much for being here today. Perfect timing, perfect topic, and perfect timing because my client literally called me right as we were wrapping up. So again, amazing. I'm so glad that you came. Jumpfly, Clever Programmatic, and AdWorld Experience. And then also the Paid Search Association is a great place to have these great conversations and meet great people like myself and Ameet. Ameet, thank you. And thank you for hanging in.
Thanks for having me. Of course.
We'll see ya. Have a good one.